Welcome to the Take Action podcast, where we empower communication partners to feel confident with AAC. I am Lauren Greenleaf, a certified speech-language pathologist with nearly a decade of experience in AAC. Join us weekly as we dive into all of the aspects of AAC and hear from communication partners just like you who are successfully integrating AAC into their daily lives. Whether you are an SLP, a parent, an educator, or any other communication partner, you are absolutely in the right place if you are ready to take actionable steps towards AAC success today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Take Action podcast. This week, I am here with Cassidy, who is an SLP who has her own private practice and also works with an early intervention caseload in Pennsylvania. So, Cassidy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am excited to chat. We are going to be talking a lot about early intervention, but more specifically parent coaching today. But before we dive into that, let's hear a little bit about your journey as a speech therapist and your journey with AAC.
So I've been a speech therapist it'll be 5 years this August, which feels like a long time and a very short time at the same time. I went to grad school at Westchester in Pennsylvania, and I was really fortunate that half of my grad assistantship while I was there was with the professor who did AAC. And I had no idea what any of that was or anything about it, but I worked with her just to program some of the devices, program some of the mid-tech stuff, to record my voice into it. And so it kind of gave me a good foundation of what AAC was. And then I took a class there with her as well, too, which helped just with some of the implementation. It was anywhere from small children to adults with aphasia. So it kind of was a wide spectrum that we were working with, but it just gave me a really good introduction to AAC. And after that, I worked at a private special ed school. And I didn't really know when I was walking in there as a CF that I would be diving headfirst into AAC. And I was mostly at the middle high school level, and there hadn't been a consistent speech therapist there in a long time. So there was kids that had devices. The teachers were like, we don't know how to program these. We don't know how to use these. We need help. And I was like, I'm a brand new clinician. I don't know yet. So it really kind of forced me to learn and to be like, okay, this teacher just handed me this device, and it's not working, or they need something added. I guess I have to figure out how to do this. So I really kind of dove head first into it there. And by the time I left that setting, about half of my caseload was AAC users. So it was super cool. It was a little bit of those older kids, but a lot of what I saw there was these kids that were 12, 13, 14, up to 19 years old, and nobody had given them access to AAC beyond maybe a simple textbook. And I was like, how are we missing these kids? How are they 15, 16 years old and they don't have any functional method to communicate when they have so much that they want to say? And I was like, I really want to be ahead of this and, get on the forefront of educating parents and having kids start really early. So I started working in early intervention, and in early intervention, I thought wow, there's going to be so many people doing this. And there wasn't at all. There really wasn't anybody doing it. Some people were doing it for kids with significant motor needs, cerebral palsy, some of those diagnoses, but especially when it came to autistic kids, there really wasn't any high-tech AAC being implemented. So again, kind of was like, well, I guess I'm just going to figure this out. I had some better knowledge, at least, of how AAC worked. And I kind of just jumped in with educating parents, being like, okay, let's figure this out and let's kind of do this. And that was a really great experience. And then I realized I still miss some of the older kids, so I did want to still do some private practice, but really focusing on AAC. So most of the kids I work with do have pretty complex communication needs.
Awesome. What a cool journey. And I am a fellow, I got experience in grad school SLP, and so many of us aren't. So I think it's nice to know that there are other programs out there that really do provide some foundational knowledge. But I also think it's really important that you highlighted the fact that you still felt like you didn't know necessarily what to do after you got out of school, which I think is just such a common feeling in general when you graduate from speech therapy school. or a grad program in general. Like there's just so much more to learn. So for any parents listening, know that we're always trying. There's just so much out there that it's really hard.
Exactly. I actually just presented a few weeks ago for that AAC class. And I told the grad
Awesome.
students like a story about my first day as a clinician with a client that needed a device, and I just had no idea what I was doing. And I was like, I just want you guys to remember, like, you might look at me up here and be like, wow, she knows so much about AAC. And I was like, I was just in your seats not that long ago, and I literally knew nothing at all.
Yeah, and I love it. That's so, so important because really, I talk to people all the time. Like I have been doing this for almost 10 years now, but like I still learn something new every single day about it, or I dive deeper into something else that I don't know a lot about. Like there's constantly this need to learn AAC and get better at it and grow as a clinician, as a parent, as a communication partner. So just doing that and getting out there and learning more is like one of the biggest barriers you can break down for yourself, is to like actually just get there and start working on it and start trying to learn more. Um, I love the transition too from older kids down to the EI, quite a bit different spectrum. I've been in that spectrum myself too, so it's different. It's a different world in high school than it is in early intervention. So let's dive into some of that parent coaching piece. So I think we all know parent coaching is important, but can you kind of highlight in your experience, like why you think it's so important or how impactful it really is in the grand scheme of it?
It's really important in EI, but I think it's also important to highlight that it's really important across all ages as well too. It's just that tends to be the EI model. You're going into the home, so you're working with the people that are with the child every day. And that's really the biggest thing. Like in Pennsylvania, I might see a kid for 1 hour, a 1 hour session once a week, but that kid is with their caregivers all of the other hours. And that 1 hour that I'm with them isn't going to make a huge difference if there's no carryover. So being able to find ways to help parents do that carryover is important. And I see the most progress with kids whose parents are carrying over the things that we're working on.
That makes a lot of sense. So with that carryover piece, what do you kind of do in your sessions to help support that? What does that, I guess, instruction coaching really look like to kind of get that carryover piece going?
As far as AAC goes, I mean, I think it starts from the beginning before you even introduce AAC. I'm not walking into the first session in a house and being like, hey, let's do a device. Like I'm really starting to build that rapport first with the family, kind of seeing where they're at. It's very new to them, not just AAC, but like this entire world of special education is very new to them. But I think what really helps is like how we say, meet children where they're at, meeting parents where they're at helps with that carryover too. Because if you're going in there and giving them a laundry list of things to work on, they're probably going to work on none of it. And it's not that they're bad parents, it's not their fault. It's just you might not be the only service. I have kids that have speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, special instruction. I mean, these parents are getting services almost every day of the week. And if you're just walking in there with your own agenda and like, hey, you need to be doing this, they're probably not going to do it. And then they're going to feel guilty about not doing it. So I think really being able to meet parents where they're at, and that starts with building that rapport with them, will help with carrying some of that stuff over. I really like to model for parents as well too. So showing them like, hey, here's one little tiny example. Like I did it with a family just the other day. The child's brother was involved, and we were just pressing go. Dad was lifting the brother up, I was lifting her up, and then the brother took a turn and he pressed go. So that was like a very structured activity that was fun, that the dad could be like, okay, like I can see myself doing this now. Like I was involved with it, I saw success with it, like I can do this with mom later on.
I love that distinction of like the success piece, right? Because we so often are like, incorporate it into your day, incorporate it into something you're already doing. But as somebody who doesn't know anything about AAC or who is new to AAC, like think about you as a clinician when you started, like if somebody was like, model go when you pick your kid up, you would have been like, okay, sure, I'll try that. But to actually get the experience of doing it with a support system in place and making it manageable and able to execute is really, really powerful.
Yeah, I had a family come to me privately with a 2-year-old. And the mom said, the speech therapist said we should be modeling all day long during all routines. And she was like, I feel so guilty because I'm not doing that. And I was like, that's okay. Like, I know best practice is, yes, we should be using the device all day long. When we're thinking about early intervention, it's just not going to happen. It's not realistic when parents are first starting out.
Yeah, and I think that key right there too is even really not necessarily the most realistic in a lot of settings, right? Because when you ideally, yes, you're going to use the device all the time, and that's where like this modeling without expectation comes from, and really showing it and talking with AAC. But there are so many other factors in life in general that make those things hard to do. And when things are hard and we don't know a lot about things, those tend to be the things we push off to the side and do the easier things. It's like a weird connection, but like I know I'm supposed to read to my girls every day. Like I'm a speech therapist. I know that. I know we're supposed to do it, but there are some days like it literally can't happen, or I'm too overwhelmed or too exhausted and we don't do it. And I could sit there and feel guilty about it, or I could just be like, tomorrow's a new day and we'll just go there. And I think teaching parents that mentality in and of itself, that like mindset of try your best, do your best, and it'll come from there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just important early intervention to keep in mind that every family is going to be so different too. Like I might walk into one house where it's just the mom all day at home with one child, and like she has 100% of her focus that can be devoted to that child. And another family might be juggling other things. They might be juggling appointments for another child, or they might have multiple other children, that they have things for, or dad might be working night shift, and like there's just so many factors that you need to keep in mind as well. And again, just meeting parents where they're at.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And it's so, so important. So when it comes to kind of backtracking a little bit, you mentioned like the rapport at the beginning, and that rapport piece kind of builds your foundation for really all AAC suggestions, implementation, all that good stuff. And I think it's really important that you highlighted it, because it is the key. Like you can't necessarily walk in and then the first minute be like, I think your kid needs an AAC device, even though like as a clinician you might have that thought already just by reading the profile of the kid. So how do you kind of transition that rapport building to kind of introducing an AAC device and kind of getting the parents on board with that decision?
That's a great question. So before I even do that, I'm always considering, now we know that there's no prerequisites for a child to use an AAC device. But when I talk to other clinicians working in early intervention, I'm like, we don't need to be looking at if the child is ready, but we really need to be looking at, is this family ready for this? Or else we're just going to have device abandonment, and it's kind of like, what's the point? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
really seeing like, okay, is this family pretty consistent with sessions? Are they canceling all the time? Are they, consistent with wanting to be involved? Is it kind of just like, oh, good, the speech therapist is here, like I can just walk away and you kind of do your thing. I'm not going to do anything else, So looking at some of those factors, what else is going on in the family's life that you think that they will be able to implement this? What does the child's environment look like? I find daycares can be very, very tricky, and it's not the teacher's fault, but they have 18 children in a classroom of 2-year-olds, and they're just not going to be able to implement an AAC device really well if that's the setting the child is in for hours and hours every day. So those are some of the things I look at first. And then I really like to introduce visuals early on, any type of visuals. I think it kind of just helps normalize picture communication and make parents realize like, hey, maybe the goal isn't speech. And again, back to kind of, is the family ready? Another thing I'm looking for is this family ready that their child might not talk? I've had some families where the kid already has a diagnosis, whether it's a genetic diagnosis or sometimes not super often they might already have an autism diagnosis. But if a family is, kind of resistant to that right now, like bringing a device in might be like, I don't really know about this because I just want my kid to talk, and like there might not be anything you can do to get over that. But bringing in those visuals early on can really help. I really like using those like single message buttons, like the Big Mac ones. Um,
Yes.
I just get them from Amazon, and I find that helps because it has the voice output. So I don't try to overdo them, but like if the parents like every time my kid wants to go outside, they're standing by the door crying. I'm like, okay, let's put a button up. We'll put a picture of outside and just record, let's go outside. And 10 out of 10 times kids use it. Like it's the easiest thing, and
Yes.
parents are like kind of just normalizes like, okay, they're communicating. That's exciting. It might not be their voice, but there's a voice output, and I found a lot of really good input from that. So I like to start with pictures in some capacity first, and also address the parent concerns kind of before they bring them up. So if I'm starting to talk about an AAC device, the things they're most concerned about, will it prevent my child from talking, and how much does it cost? For like the two things.
Yep.
So
So true. So
if
true.
I can bring that up before they do, I can kind of like address those concerns right away. So
Yeah.
I'll usually talk about research that, this doesn't prevent children from talking. It doesn't mean it's going to make them talk, but it doesn't prevent them from talking. And then in Pennsylvania, thankfully, it's very easy to get devices funded through medical assistance. So I don't really deal with a lot of difficulties on the funding side. So I'm able to tell families, like, I can't guarantee this, but in my experience, medical assistance um, covers the full cost of devices, for every child I've ever worked with. So that makes it a little bit easier to talk with them because they're not paying for it out of pocket. And I think what helps the most is when I'm starting to bring it up, I have a loaner device, or even just if you have a program on an iPad, I have it with me. And I'm like, here's what this looks like. Because people's views of it are still really outdated, and they're thinking of this like giant, like almost like how TVs used to be like a giant box. Um, and
Yeah.
so I just bring the device with me, and I'm like, this is what it looks like. Like, we might not use this program, but like, here's kind of what it looks like. And technology is so normal nowadays that most people are like, oh, okay, yeah, I think that would help. And just them seeing it sometimes is all they need to buy in.
Yeah. No, I like that thought process a lot. There's so many great things that you just said. And that last piece is, it's funny because I've had recent experiences where I've mentioned it in kind of a school setting. So it was a slightly different situation, but I didn't have the chance to expand on it and really share a lot before mom kind of went down a rabbit hole of internet searching and pretty much instantly was like, I don't think this is what we need. And it's so true. It's just not, it looks so different for so many people that we can't just like look at this one internet search of what AAC is and how it looks and how it works, because it's going to look so different for so many different families. Um, and the visual piece is something I feel really passionate about too. A lot of my early intervention visits, typically, if not the first session, the second session, they're getting a set of visuals to put around their house, to kind of support that communication piece. I usually bring my like AAC tote bag that has like a core board on it. So it's there. It's because here's the thing, like we all use communication supports, right? Like everybody does, but as soon as we like put it in the context of it's going to more heavily support at the beginning, people get instantly like kind of scared of it and don't don't know. And when we don't know things and we're scared of things, like we're not like, sure, Cassidy, let's try it. That sounds great. It's very much like, I don't know. I think maybe we could wait a little longer. And those are some really, really solid recommendations on how to kind of navigate and support.
Yeah, and that definitely helps bring those visuals in because again, it also takes that focus away from, hey, I'm just here to make your kid talk, and more so, let's work together to get them communicating. It gets that buy-in a little bit more.
All right, so let's kind of switch gears in a sense to talk about how we can really support that coaching piece. Like, what can a coaching session look like so that parents can really get success with that device early on and feel confident and ready to try more?
I think what helps is when I first give parents the device when they get one that they're going to trial, I always give a form. I have one that I use that I had purchased from somewhere. I don't remember exactly where it was from. And then one I had created that talks about like navigation and sets up different scenarios and, what word could you use in this scenario? And I tell them, like all I care about this first week is just kind of you getting familiar with just using it and like where things are on it. And a lot of families really like that because it takes the pressure off of like, oh my gosh, I have to figure out how to use it with my child. And instead, like, let me look at this list. Oh, if you're hungry and want a snack, let me go see if I can find some words that I would use. And then when that situation comes up, they feel a little bit more confident in finding those words. So helping with the navigation to start, but also just starting really small and problem solving with the parent. Like, where do you feel like you could see yourself using this? I'm not going to tell you got to use it all day long, like we had mentioned before, but what routine, what situation do you feel like you could be like, okay, let's use this? I had one family that the child loved brown bear. And so I showed mom, it was touch chat, which happens to have that built in. And I showed mom the brown bear page set, and she was like, okay, like I could do this when we read brown bear. So finding something that like the parent already enjoys doing with their child can really help, and then showing them how to do it. But again, problem solving with them to come up with that. A family that the dad really likes playing the guitar, and we had already made a song choice board. So it was like that's something that they find joyful as a family, so it's easy to incorporate that in. It doesn't feel like a chore. So my sessions when I'm in families' homes are a lot of just back and forth conversation, coming up with ideas, and then like, hey, let's try that out right now. Like while we're here, let's try it out, see if you can get comfortable with it, so that then you can kind of do that throughout the week. But really just starting small. It's so easy as speech therapists, especially when you've been doing AAC, you forget what it's like to be brand new to it. And to them, I'm like, if
Mm-hmm.
they can just like use it for the word go this week, like that's great.
Yeah.
That's success to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that is such the key piece right there is that it takes one thing. Like you do not have to master AAC the first month you have it. It's that one step and that really joyful experience. Like we're not throwing the device in and being like, they need to communicate all their feelings so these meltdowns don't happen. Like we're not starting with the difficult communication piece. We're starting with something that's going to be fun and engaging and successful. We want the success early on so that we can really grow our skills and not get defeated almost instantly because something didn't work out. So
Exactly. And I think in early
yeah,
intervention, keeping in mind too, like, these kids are, 18 months to 3 years old. What are kids that age typically communicating about? We get very stuck on like, I want them to ask for water or for cookie, things like that. But a lot of kids at those age are saying, uh-oh, oops, wow, animal sounds. So their first words with the device might not be, like I want water. It's probably going to be some of those other more exciting things, and showing parents those really helps as well too, because then the device becomes fun and engaging versus I just have to use this when my kid wants something. And some kids will be successful with that, but a lot of them won't. I had a little boy that I showed dad when I evaluated him in my clinic. And I was like, this is something we could explore. Like, let me show you. And that little boy loved uh oh. He thought it was the funniest thing in the world. But the device said, uh-oh,
Yeah.
and dad was like, well, like he really likes it. Like I think that would be good. And I was like, oh, you just had to get him to laugh, get him to be excited about it. So focusing on some of those different words can really help too.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm so glad you went there because I think as speech therapists specifically, and even as parents, like learning about AAC, there's such a huge focus on the core vocabulary, right? And the core vocabulary is really important. Do not get me wrong there. Like, we do need the core vocabulary. It's a great place to start, it's a great place to expand. But for our really little ones, their language isn't necessarily like all core vocabulary. It's not like their first 50 words were all core vocabulary words. And that's something I noticed with my girls when they started talking. Like, there were so many fringe words in there, and there were so many animal sounds and exclamations and like all that good stuff that's so much more powerful to a little one and so much less intimidating to a parent, I think, too. Like, I find really easy to say and incorporate versus like don't like or something like that. So I love that you went there because I think that's a really important coaching opportunity for parents, because I find two parents often want, and not always, but often are looking at communication to like solve something that's happening, right? We're having a meltdown at mealtime, or we're having frustration over not being able to communicate something. So we have a tendency to be like, we want that specific word to get this specific thing, right? And it becomes more transactional in a sense where we're really looking for this connection piece. Communication is connection. That's what we spend all our time with babies trying to do, is really just making that connection and kind of coaching families through the fact that like that's what we're aiming for. We're it'll be great if they can say those words and helpful if they can say those, but we really want that connection piece to build so that we can get where we need to
I
go.
talk with families a lot about buy-in. Like, our first goal is we just need to get this child to buy into the AAC device, and that might not look like what you expect it to. I had a little girl in my office that I just started with. She just aged out of early intervention, and she loves Finding Dory. And so I recorded "Just Keep Swimming, Just Keep Swimming" as a button, and she loved it, and she was handing me characters and then touching it for me to do that with. And the mom was like, this is amazing, like we had tried a device before, but it was very much like hand over hand to ask for things, and she wasn't interested in it. And I explained to the mom, like, this might not be something that's going to solve the difficulties that you're having at home, but it's getting her buy-in to, hey, this isn't something that people are using to get me to work or to try to get demands out of me. Like, this is fun. And I was like, this is just the first step. It's building that engagement. And if we just keep joy at the center, I think it would go a long way.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Just keep joy at the center. What a perfect quote for the episode today. Um, so as we kind of like run to the tail end, any specific ideas or like conversations that you've had in regards to coaching that you really feel like can help a new SLP out, or even parents maybe that are looking to have some better interactions with their SLP around AAC? I hope that makes
I
sense.
think one thing that can really help as a speech therapist is talking about what progress can look like. I tell the parents I work with, your child might not touch the device, and that's okay. But providing them other things that show progress. So, hey, did you notice when I press go, she rolled the car to you? Or every time we're going in and pressing mommy and daddy, like he's looking at the device and then looking at you. So he might not be touching it independently himself, but he's starting to make that association. So, really explaining to parents in the moment, hey, this is a sign of progress. Because especially when kids, are a little bit slower to warm up to wanting to activate it themselves, it can get kind of defeating for parents. Well, this isn't working. If you're not explaining to them what progress looks like, that's what they're going to think. So, as a new speech therapist, as someone who's working with parents in EI or in a private practice setting, just saying, like, hey, they might not touch it, but here's some other things that we can look for that show that they're progressing. The receptive language might be improving, or they're smiling after you're touching icons. They're attending to an activity longer when the device is used. So just finding some of those small things and small wins with parents really helps. Um, and then a second thing, and this is something I tell probably all of my families, is engagement first, language second, which kind of goes back to that connection thing. But I think that's important to remember as a speech therapist and as a parent, is that first the child needs to be engaged, right? Like bringing some of that OT component a little bit. We need to get them engaged first before we can be like, hey, here's some language to add to this. So whatever that
Yeah.
engagement looks like. So instead of me just going over the child and saying, up, do you want me to pick you up? I'm going to pick them up first, get them really excited, and then I'm going to add that language in second. So just remembering to engage them first and bring the language in secondary.
Yeah, love those distinctions. And I love the fact, too, that last example of really showing what that looks like. Engagement is interacting with the kid and then throwing the language in. You can start an activity and then add language as you go. And I think a misconception in the AAC world is that it has to start with the AAC piece. It has to start with that initiation on the device. It has to start with modeling on the device. It has to start at the device and then move to the activity. And it can very easily start at the activity, and then you can slowly incorporate that device into it.
Exactly.
So, awesome, Cassidy. Well, I know you're on Instagram, so if people want to follow along with you, how can they learn a bit more about you?
I have a professional Instagram. It's at Speech with Cassidy, and then my business Instagram is at Around the Spectrum Therapy.
Awesome. Great. Well, we will put those in the show notes for everyone. And Cassidy, thank you so much for being here today. I think this was a really great conversation to get people nice and energized for some parent coaching.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.